Well, a quick introduction about myself. I'm Azmer Mohammed. I'm a senior product manager at VMware. I'm glad I'm presenting at 9 on Wednesday, because if I'm presenting at 9 tomorrow, you guys will be very hungover. I'm also glad that I'm not competing against Steve Jobs at 10 o'clock, because you guys will be checking your laptop and your mobile phones to figure out exactly what he's announcing. What I want to spend some time today on is really to share with you VMware's roadmap around data protection. And this is a very broad topic. I don't think I can really do it justice in an hour. And there's a couple of other ways that you can definitely interact with me. Obviously, ask questions during the presentation. Would love to hear that. I have a discussion forum that's happening at noon in Moscone West. So if you've got time during lunchtime, come on over to Moscone West. There's a couple of discussion rooms. We can talk about it a bit more. I'm fairly active on in the VMware backup and recovery forums. So if you have a question, send it on there. In addition to myself, there's a bunch of people on the development team. Obviously, the folks in the community that really help out. And so but to set the broader context here, with when backup and recovery is one of these things that a lot of people understand. I talk to a generation older than me. When I say back up your PC, people get it. People exactly know what it is. People know it's tape. Fundamentally, though, as you move to virtualization, a lot of these things can change. We're driving change. Our ecosystem is driving change. But I think from an operational standpoint, there's a lot of things that sort of get dragged along with it. What I hope to do today is not to talk to you about what we did in 1991, how that applies to 2010, right? I'm not going to talk about file agent-based backups, mainly because I don't think really that's where VMware is going to innovate. However, I know completely that you guys use that. There's a variety of reasons why you use it. Same thing around media. I'm going to talk a lot about disk today as a target, as opposed to tape. I know for a fact that probably all of you use tape in some capacity. No knock against tape, but tape as a media, there's a lot of limitations. Single write, you can't really dedupe it. You have to physically move it around, and so there's not a lot of room for innovation as far as VMware is concerned relative to that. What I do hope to achieve is to sort of share with you two parts of our roadmap. One is what we're going to do here through next year. Pretty much things that are already in flight. If you haven't been familiar with VMware, it used to be that our product cycles were much longer, maybe 2 years. And the way we used to develop products is to, we're gonna shove as much as we can in that release, and then wait until everybody's done, and then we hit the go button. What we've moved to in the past couple of years is to go to a release train. Effectively, you can anticipate a major release of vSphere every calendar year, probably around the June, July timeframe. And so I'm going to cover sort of what, relative to data protection, how that looks like sort of with vSphere 4.1 that just got released, and what's going to come out in vSphere next year. The second half of the talk really is about what I see trends, what I've distilled from my conversations with customers, with our ecosystem, to really give you a flavor of sort of what's coming down the pipe. In terms of actions, there may be some short-term actions, maybe there aren't. But I really do think there's going to be a fundamental change in terms of how you're going to do your backups relative to what you're doing today, based on some of the things that's really happening out in the ecosystem. All right. So this is a repeat of a session I had on Monday, and the first thing I started out with, other than asking about who's going to buy Steve Jobs' new iPods, is the kind of data protection mechanisms that you use today. So sort of, and broadly how I ask the question is, if I were to ask, how many vendors do you use today to protect your data in a vSphere environment? What's the count, right? So just want to show your hand. So you only use a single vendor to back up your VMs in your vSphere environment. One vendor. All right. 2 vendors. Okay. 3 vendors. More than 3? Okay. So a lot of ones and twos. And I get customer feedback around the same thing, which is, on one hand, they'd love to minimize the number of vendors that they work with, right? So just, the proverbial one throat to choke, and and the ease of doing business. On the other hand, there's always something new that comes up that requires some new vendor that gets introduced. And you'll see around data protection, our strategy really is around working with the ecosystem to deliver a lot of these benefits. So it's a roadmap session. I'm going to talk a lot about things that we are planning, we're thinking heavily about, but I guess lawyers say I may be lying. So that's the disclaimer there. So just high level, when I talk about data protection at VMware, I really talk about the things that we start off with, which is taking a snapshot, not using an agent, attaching it to what used to be a holding tank, but now you don't really need that holding tank, and then streaming that data off to the target destination. The benefits there is that you really just offload the backup process. Fundamentally, we want to eliminate backup windows. We want to eliminate the need for you to spend a lot of time trying to get an agent inside the VM before you can deploy it out in production. So our goal is really to just get backup out of the critical path. It happens automatically. And then restores, you can restore a full image, right? And we've always, the beauty of virtual machines is that because it's a bunch of files, you can always restore that, do a bare metal restore much faster than you could on a physical machine, but also provide you with the same backup, the ability to restore files, right? Because we know that more often than not, that's really what you're going to be protecting against is restoration of files. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today really will revolve around sort of this vision here, but as we accelerate out into the future, how that changes. Okay. All right. So as I said, there's two parts to the talk today. What we're going to talk about through next year, we're really going to update on three things. VMware Consolidated Backup. I'm going to talk about vStorage API for data protection, something we introduced last year with vSphere. And then I'm going to talk about VMware Data Recovery, which is VMware's built-in backup recovery solution. Once we're done with that, we're going to sort of accelerate out to the future and talk about really what's coming out there. We're going to talk about snapshots. A lot of the value that we provide comes from snapshots. And so if you want to scale up the recovery point objectives, you want to scale out the number of VMs you want to protect, you've got to start with snapshots. We're going to cover a little bit about that. Storage efficiency. As I said, we don't really see tape being this long-term target for us, understanding that it's there in your environments. So storage in terms of disk, that needs to be something that we really have to talk about, both inside the data center and also outside the data center. And that's what we talk about, the last two things around the cloud. You probably saw a lot of that talk yesterday in the keynote around leveraging the infrastructure out there. There's a lot of vendors out there today, and we are going to empower that ecosystem also. We want to provide the links that connect your private cloud to the public cloud. So there's a couple of different ways we're going to do that. All right, so I'm going to start with what's happening here in the next 12 months. I'm going to come down. Please feel free to ask questions. It's better that way. I think it's a manageable crowd size, and hopefully it'll get people to exchange ideas too. All right, so let's start with VCB. So VCB was our first stab at this first step of the journey towards this agentless, lightweight backup process, where we really move the backup process outside of the virtual machine. You snapshot the virtual machine from the outside. You go ahead and you could use your SAN to send the data from the source to the destination, and really make it lightweight. Our strategy was to integrate with our ecosystem partners. We know that a lot of you had purchased your backup software many, many years ago. You standardize on them. You have a very good relationship with them. And so we went ahead and really tried to integrate with them, and we'll continue to do that going forward. But the way that VCB was implemented, it was a bunch of scripts. Also allowed a lot of our customers to use scripts, homebrew scripts, to do their backups. There are a variety of reasons for that. But there's something here that really matters for that constituent going forward, because VCB is going away. So there's a variety of reasons for this, but the fact is VCB is going away. vSphere 4.1 is the last release of vSphere that will include VCB. So VCB 1.5 U2 is a release. 4.1 is the last compatible version of vSphere. So fast forward next year, you get that new ESX host, you get that new vSphere Center server, VCB is not going to work, right? We're not going to test against it. The binaries are not going to run on that ESX host. And you're going to run into a lot of funny configurations here that, when we talk about backup and protecting your data is not so funny anymore. So we want to plan for that. So what could potentially happen out next year? So obviously the scripts that you've been depending on will not work. And that's not good. I've been on a couple of escalations this week around this. We're already seeing some of the effects of this. And really the transition is to move to a third-party solution or look at data recovery from VMware. Those are really the two options here. And so you want to start talking to your backup vendor. If you're running backup software from 2 or 3 years ago, most likely it was integrated with VCB. Most of those vendors, as you can see, there's a slide later on today, and as you see in the exhibitor showcase, have already integrated with VADP, the latest iteration of our backup framework. So you want to make sure you start those conversations today, figure out exactly how it fits. Again, and there's a lot of choice out there, so I want to make sure that one comment that I got from a customer recently was, VADP is still new, there's not a lot of integration. That's false. There's a lot of integration. I had an ecosystem partner come on Monday and wanted to make sure that their name showed up on the list of vendors that I'm going to show you in about 20 minutes. So very, very key for you to focus on that. Mixed environments. I know that a lot of you probably, as you migrate from one version of ESX to vSphere to the next, you'll probably have a mix of older ESX hosts under a newer version of a virtual center server. What could potentially happen is that you'll have VMs running fine on the older hosts. You do a vMotion or there's an HA, it moves over to the new host, VCB doesn't work anymore. That's going to impact you, so you don't want to get into that position. And then finally, VCB requires Converter for you to do a restore. Converter may not have that built-in capability to read VCB images going forward. So these are four, potentially there's more on this list of things that could impact you here if you don't start thinking about, okay, how do I move off of VCB? Also, new features. We released VADP last year, and we made a conscious decision to only include new features in VADP. So if you're looking for Linux support, you're looking for VSS support for Windows 2008 and 2008 R2. Probably that's a big piece of your migration plans. You're not going to get that in VCB. So one thing that doesn't show up on here, yeah, it does. Change block tracking. For me, it was like, that's kind of cool. It's a feature that allows you to, allows the kernel to track change blocks of a virtual disk. How fun could that be? Well, apparently for the backup ecosystem, a lot of fun. Pretty much every one of them, this is sort of the number one or number two feature that they talk about. It's huge for them. So change block tracking really does make a difference in terms of backup performance. You don't really have to churn through scanning the disks. You get that list of dirty blocks directly from the kernel. So you'll and there's another session if you've got a chance called host-based replication. Same thing. We're fundamentally using similar technologies to go figure out the deltas in disks. All right. So that's big news. So again, you need to start thinking about moving from VCB. And finally, this is it. This is the list of all the the vendors, and this is a partial list. I'm sure there's more that I haven't listed here of major players in the industry, virtualization-centric and sort of physical and virtual, that have VADP integration today. So start talking to them, really plan out what your backup infrastructure is going to look like. These guys will have a solution. Okay, so going forward, our strategy really is around two parts. One, absolutely continuing the work that we've done with the ecosystem partners. They're going to go ahead and innovate based on the infrastructure they provide to them. They're going to innovate on their own, independent of us, and we're going to continue to support them on that. We also see a lot of new customers. I don't know how many of you were in the keynote yesterday, but there was mentions of the Essentials Kit, which is our SMB offering for the low end for smaller business. And there's Essentials and Essentials Plus. And one of the key cornerstones of those solutions is a product called VMware Data Recovery. And the intent of that product is to help small businesses have a better way to back up their virtual machines. Easy way, fully integrated from a UI. You don't have to deal with a separate vendor. And so we've really innovated there. One thing that we've learned is that more than SMBs want to use data recovery. So we made some small steps towards sort of expanding the scope there, but I think longer term you'll still see a lot of innovation that a lot of things that you'll have to probably deal with multiple vendors to address those your data protection needs. So we really think the ecosystem is going to answer a lot of that. Okay, so from a VADP standpoint, it was a major change for when we went out to them in, I would say it's 2008 and said that, you know what, we're thinking about changing VCB to VADP. They'd done a lot of work to integrate with VCB, and we went to them and said, well, there's this new thing that we have called VADP, provides you to be able to ship binaries all together. The customers don't have to stitch it together on their installer. You can do it all for them, really seamless, beautiful integration, but you're going to have to rewrite. And then we're going to introduce something called VSS inside the guest. Then you're going to have to figure that out, how it works with you. So we did a lot. We caused them to do a lot of work. The list that you saw a couple of slides back is the result of that integration, right? They've done a lot of that work. So right now it's sort of, okay, so we've got the integration done. Let's go and polish that out and really drive a lot of change in the customer's environments. So the way that we see it for the next year or so really is to make sure that as we go on this once-a-year cadence on vSphere, the day that we announce vSphere 2011, we've got our ecosystem there ready with backup software that will protect that environment. That's going to be a lot of work, in software. Some of you probably in software development, but that's planning 6 to 9 months ahead, right? We're in conversations today about what's going to happen this time next year, right? So we want to make sure there's a lot of coordination there. Schedules may not fit in, but that's a key thing for us. The other thing, obviously, is going to be, look, with data recovery out in the market, we want to make sure that you continue to innovate, right? So this is where we're going to let them innovate. VSS is a key example there. Some of the vendors out there in the market have innovated on top of the VSS functionality that we provide to really provide better integration in environments that customers are asking for. So with vSphere 4.1, we added functionality for application-level QSing for Windows 2008 and 2008 R2. For those of you, I'm going to dig a bit deeper here. For those of you familiar with VSS, there's a variety of different ways for you to implement it. We implement VSS BT copy. What this means is that we will stun the VMs. When you ask for a snapshot, we will stun the VM down to the application layer so that the snapshot that you get is absolutely application consistent. All transactions are going to be flushed from the queue onto the disk, and we'll go and take a snapshot there. So if you were to delete the VM at that point, restore it back, you'll get your application back to where it was. What we don't do is truncate the transaction log. And tier 1 applications, they generally write to a transaction log first before they write to the database. And so depending on how you manage that, a lot of application owners tell me, look, I do it on my own. Then you're set. You are ready. Your application ready. Your logs are getting truncated manually. If you expect the backup software to go do this, then it's not there yet, and we're going to go ahead and get you there. So there are ways around. There are other solutions around that, but for VSS support in tools, we don't have that today. Okay. Any questions on that? I know I got a lot of questions on the forum, so I want to make sure that since we have this opportunity to go dive into that, if at all possible. Yes, sir. Yep. So Microsoft isn't a VADP partner. So they can, obviously and so you can use generally any backup software to back up a virtual machine. You install an agent in it. So that's the old way of doing things. For VADP, since we take a snapshot outside, you integrate with our API. These are the vendors that I know of that are definitely on the show floor today. There's more on there. DPM isn't a.
Can you repeat the questions for the record? Thank you.
Okay. So the question is, where's DPM on this list? And the answer is it's not, because they're not VADP compliant. Okay. Any other questions? Good question, by the way. Okay. So moving forward. So platform compatibility. So we're going to have a lot of changes in the next release of vSphere. I'm not sure I'm at liberty to tell you exactly what it is, but this is a subtle hint. We'll have definitely new virtual hardware support. We do that. There's always devices that in hardware that comes out, and we have to have a virtual version of that. That's going to come out next year. There's going to be changes inside VMFS, enhancements that I think will be beneficial for you in terms of storage efficiency. So we'll go ahead and support that also. So again, a lot of this is under the covers, but it'll give you a lot of different ways to do your backups and also to do your restores. So these changes we're going to head and make sure that our backup partners are aware of. And the third thing is probably less relevant for you as an end customer, but very relevant for an ecosystem partner, was how easy is it to integrate with VMware. So I mentioned before, hey, we went to them a couple of years ago and said we're going to have you go through, do all this work again. And there was a lot of different APIs, a lot of different things, and they really had to, in the background, stitch it together. And what I've noticed is for every vendor that we talked to, we had a different interaction method. We had, well, some did better than others, some knew exactly what to do, some had needed more help, and we want to make sure that we normalize that. The reason why is if I don't do that, then you won't get number one up there. You won't get a backup solution available the day that you want to migrate to vSphere. So we want to make sure that we get that running. So a lot of this is really a lot of hard work, a lot of focus from engineering that we have to deliver, hopefully as value for you in terms of getting ready to move on. Yes, sir. Where do we get the information on? The unified API set. So are you a developer? Okay. Talk to me afterwards. So it is part of our Technology Alliance Partner Program. And there's redistribution agreements and whatnot, but come talk to me. We can set you up. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So let's talk about VMware Data Recovery. So VMware Data Recovery, you saw a couple of slides back, is also built on VADP. The two key differences is one, it's got a vSphere client UI. So instead of having the UI that you're comfortable with in terms of from your backup vendor, we give you a UI that's very comfortable if you're a vSphere client user. So that's the one big change. Second change is that it's disk only. So if you don't have a need for other types of media, you want to use a virtual disk as your destination, this is a simple way for you to do your backups. Obviously, it backups only vSphere VMs. So it's been very successful. There were two. Oh, there's a second one today. There's a technical session around VMware Data Recovery. I think it's noon today, if I'm not mistaken. It was sold out. There was 650 people signed up for it for 250 seats on Monday. So if you're interested in that, I would highly recommend getting here early. And Michael White's a rock star. He's one of our best technical guys. So what we want to do is continue to innovate as a built-in vSphere backup utility. Really, that's it. There's with backup, as I said earlier, there's a bunch of different ways for you to go with this. We want to really laser focus on what we think is the best differentiated way to deliver backup for virtual machines. So some of the things that we've done and that's out today is one, we've initially supported only a single appliance per vCenter server. Our appliances are limited to 100 VMs per appliance, and we went ahead and increased that limit to 10 appliances per virtual center server. That means that if you need to, you can go ahead and deploy multiple appliances that will scale up. So you can back up to 1,000 VMs, or you can run backups concurrently. So if you're challenged in terms of backup windows, you can run backups concurrently. Or if you're running out of space, right, you actually need more dedupe stores. This is another way for you to sort of get to that end goal. So we'll support that. We had shipped a file-level restore client from Windows, and I want to pause a little bit on that. So the way that we do backup is via snapshots. Snapshot is an image of the disk. And then we stream that data down to the dedupe store, and it's deduped. So what file-level restore is a client that runs inside a virtual machine, very, very small footprint client. And what it does, it reaches out to the dedupe store, opens up the dedupe store based on your credentials, and then it mounts restore points as a directory on your virtual disks. So what you end up seeing is a directory that maps to that restore point a time and date snap. So it's very cool because what you're doing, you've saved a lot of time up front on backups because you're using snapshots, but you get the flexibility of restoring on both image and file level. So we introduced a Linux file level restore client for Linux VMs about a month and a half ago. And then third is the application level QSing that I discussed previously with what ships with VADP. So VDR benefits from any VADP enhancements. Going forward, we're going to go ahead and make this a true 64-bit virtual appliance. And this is big for VMware, probably not as big for you guys. So VDR is probably the number one deployed virtual appliance from VMware. And sort of we're sort of canary in the coal mine. We get to test out a bunch of different things, and all that feedback goes back to the development team at VMware so we can build better virtual appliances. So we had moved to a 64-bit guest OS about 6 months ago, but the binaries for VDR are still 32-bit. So we're going to move that to a 64-bit binary, and that gives us a lot of benefits, right? And you guys know this from your 32 to 64-bit guest migration for desktops and for servers. So we believe we're going to be able to deliver improvement in the number of concurrent operations, improve integrity check and recatalog performance. Those of you not familiar with that, that's sort of the housekeeping that we have to do for integrity for our dedupe store to make the dedupe store more efficient and make sure that you don't keep stale backups. So we're going to do a lot of things there. And then we're also going to do a lot of ease of use enhancement. Again, this is something that I think we've learned as we've had people deploy this. We had sort of one profile of customer when we thought about VDR. We went out there, found out that, look, it's fairly horizontal. A lot of people and with different needs and want to do things differently. They need some of these tweaks in order to make it really work well in their environment. So we're addressing a lot of this. So we're planning on allowing you to schedule your integrity checks and reclaim operations. So a good use case around that is, since we don't support tape here, a lot of customers said, hey, I want to be able to stream data from your dedupe store out to tape. I don't care if I use my second or third or fourth backup vendor to go do it, because that's no cost to me from a CapEx or OpEx standpoint. So when you do that, if you were to block out no backups happening in a window, no integrity checks and reclaim operations happening, you've got a window, really nothing is happening on the dedupe store, you can pull out the data safely. So that's one use case where you can use that for. Second is, if you've got backup jobs that potentially will run long, you can always create a buffer that you can say, look, maybe a backup job will run long. It doesn't compete with resources with reclaim and integrity check. So we're doing that. Second is interruptible integrity checks. So if it's running and you need CPU cycles back, you can pause it, wait for it to run later. Around jobs, and this was an interesting one. I thought, once you create a backup job, why would you want to stop it, right? The whole point here is that you always have a backup. Well, I guess there's enough reasons for customers to suspend it, either to upgrade an infrastructure. So they want to be able to not have to delete their backup jobs, right? Even though if it's 4 steps to create a backup job in VDR, people just want to say, look, I just want to have a bunch of jobs, run some, not run others, so the ability for you to suspend them will be there. And then we'll also be able to schedule the backup jobs easier too. So today it's on a day and hour block. We're planning to look at providing you ways to run this either more granular or less granular. And then email reports, which is probably the number one feature that I get asked around, which is, how do I know my backups ran without going into vSphere client? So we're going to deliver a lot of this functionality next year, and its ability for you to get email reports. What you'll get is an email digest. So these are mock-ups that we have come up with. So the final product may look different, but the idea there is that you've got a configuration screen that you specify your username, password, your email address, when you want to send out, and what language you want to send it out in. And what you'll get is something that looks like this guy over here on the front, a digest of what ran, what's in process, and what didn't run, which is probably what most people really are going to be focused on. Okay? All right, so that ends the first half of my talk, which is around what we're delivering over the next 12 to 18 months. Any questions on that before I move forward to the future? Yes, sir. So the question is, can we explain around log management for these tier 1 applications? Absolutely. So let me get up on stage here. So, and again, I'm not going to profess to be an application expert, but I do know that like Exchange and SharePoint, you can manually truncate the logs, right? So by definition, every transaction that goes through gets written to the transaction log first before it gets flushed out to the database. In a lot of file agent-based backup solutions, the backup agent actually does the truncating of the logs. So if you do a backup every night, the agent generally truncates the logs for you and flushes it out so that the next day your log effectively is empty, right? And you start building out transactions, backup starts again, is flushed, repeat and rinse and repeat forever and ever. So VSS today doesn't do that part. VSS will allow you to, VSS implemented in VMware tools in vSphere 4.1 will allow you to QS the VM. So it says pause, stop. So that at that point, if you take a snapshot, you have an application consistent image. But what happens is you'll have, if you were to disaggregate the disk, you'll still see a database, you'll see your transaction log before the backup. And then after the backup, you'll see the disk and the transaction log, and they're the same, right? The log hasn't been truncated. What we're going to do in the future absolutely is going to allow you to have the backup application be able to truncate the log. It's not there, and I don't want to commit to something, but effectively it delivers this thing that if you're used to it in an agent-based solution, you'll get that with VADP. Okay. Any other questions on that? Yes, sir. So the question is, as we scaled up VDR from 1 per virtual center instance to 10 per virtual center instance, is there a associated overhead related to that? So the answer, I guess, is it depends. The virtual machine itself is fairly lightweight. I think it's 2 vCPUs. I think it's a 5 gig system disk, right? So by itself, it's fairly lightweight, and we'll probably try to optimize that going forward. But then you can do things that are very environmentally dependent. One is the size of your dedupe store, right? So if you have a dedupe store that's 250 gigs versus a terabyte, right? That's space that that you create. Second is whether it's thin or thick provision, the disk, right? That's going to be another thing. The most important things are going to be how many backups do you do and what do your backups look like, right? So that's when we actually have to crank the VM, run through the dedupe, attach snapshots and whatnot. So all those things it depends. We've seen, since we've had it out with people deploying this, I really haven't seen any issues crop up relative to, hey, I've got more than one now and I've seen X or Y change in my environment. So in that sense, I think we've QA'd it very well. I think the community has come back and said they really don't see any impact with having the scale. So right? We have best practices in terms of deploying a single appliance per ESX host, right? We just think it's best practice. So we think you have things like that, but by and large, there isn't an issue in terms of scaling and impact of the scaling. Okay. Any questions here? All right. Great. Okay. So as we look out to 2012, I think, as I said, there's really 4 areas that we really want to focus on. One is around snapshots. Second is around storage efficiency. And then the third, A and B, is around the cloud. One is archiving on the cloud, backup to the cloud. You probably heard this a lot. Probably a lot of you use this today for your desktops. We think there's a significant opportunity there for server workloads to be backed up to the cloud also, and I'll tell you why. And then more importantly is restore to the cloud. So you probably heard around the vCloud, the vCloud Director. Yeah, so the one that Steve Herod ding marketing for. I'm a marketing guy, and I know that's not true. We didn't make that change last minute. But VDC, the VDCs are going to provide us a cool avenue in terms of using a new way for you to deliver functionality, to the market. All right, so let's take a look at that, see what it looks like. So why are we thinking about this, right? Why change? Isn't what you deliver today good enough? Well, there's a lot of things that are just happening here. Some of these things probably you're encountering today, right? Number of VMs, effectively elimination of the backup window. your internal customer is asking you, I want backups more than X numbers a day, right? You want to move to something that's not tape-based because it's not as efficient, but let's not kid ourselves. Storage is not inexpensive, so you want to be able to drive that cost down. You've got all these different tools, right? Today we all started out with Virtual Center. Well, that's great and all, but VMware by itself is introducing a bunch of management applications. How do backups tie into that, right? What happens if you want to make backup a service in your enterprise? What does that look like? And you may want to have multiple copies of data, right? You may want to have it for long-term archive. You want to have it for nearline storage. And today, that's 2 or 3x the cost because you are literally keeping that many copies of data. So all these things, we think there's a lot of room for innovation. And we're seeing some of this already being solved by a lot of the smaller, more agile startups out there. See them in the exhibitor showcase. But I think we're going to have VMware will have a role in terms of enabling the ecosystem to go deliver this in the more mainstream products too. All right, so scalable snapshots. So VMware, when we talk about in the context of VADP, we issue a vSphere snapshots. Same snapshots that you would if you were to right-click on a VM and say create snapshots, same one that you would revert. We just create a temporary snapshot, right? We use it for the express interest of doing a backup. Once you're done with the backup, we delete it, and you don't see it after that, all right? But we use the same underlying mechanism. But it's not so great. It's not the use case. When it was created, it was not the use case for really scalable backup. So we really think there's a lot of innovation here that we're going to do. So we want to be able to snapshot a VM for the purposes of backups more often in a day. And we want to be able to do that so that it's less impactful to the system. Like the gentleman asked me around how the impact of the system. Well, this is one of the operations that probably will be the biggest impact of the system. So we want to make this fairly lightweight and deliver it with as little copy on write overhead. Those of you familiar with snapshots, there's a term called redo log, and snapshots has evolved significantly. So we used to have snapshots in the ESX 3.302 days that we significantly enhanced in 3.5. And we've done a lot of this, really incremental improvements over the years. So snapshots today are actually very good. With VDR, by and large, I don't deal with snapshot escalations at all. But we know that as you increase the scale up in order of magnitude, you got to look at something new. So we're definitely going to look at that. Another way is to offload. And recognize a gentleman here from one of our storage partners. And we really need to look at ways that we can offload to the array. So if you have invested in a SAN array that has really fast snapshot performance, why is VMware still issuing that snapshot in software? Right? Why not offload that? It's more efficient. You get double the return on your investment. We get to offload and make things better. So there's a program called VAAI that we announced with our storage partners, and so we're gonna leverage that in order to provide this offload capability going forward. So so stay tuned. We've got a program. We're gonna innovate more on that. The third is shareable. So this is the thought again around how you can get one snapshot and have multiple copies of data. So today, let's say for example, you have 3 different products that you use for data protection for different reasons, right? Each one of them are taking a single snapshot, taking up space, and then you have to sort of manage that. What we'd like to get to is a point where you can have a single snapshot and literally have it float in the infrastructure and have it get called by these different products, so that a single snapshot, you get sort of the same point in time copy, and then it gets deleted once that whole workflow is done, right? So this is the idea of a shareable snapshot. This is not easy to do, but we think that this is something that we can innovate on and really drive a lot of value for customers. And then in-guest support. So this really is, we talked a lot about VSS. We didn't talk a lot about Linux, because Linux doesn't have, to the best of my knowledge, a VSS equivalent. So as more workloads sort of fall in that guest OS category, we're going to have to figure out how we do this. Obviously, Linux is an open source community, right? We're going to have to figure out how to do it well with that community. So a lot of talks, again, it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be VMware by itself for doing this, but from a virtual machine standpoint, we definitely have a big stake in terms of driving this. So for us, all these things really are tied together. So you'll probably see this come out in little chunks at a time. Obviously, we don't want to say, the way that VMware works now is not about, look, we're going to get all 4 of these bullet items out and ready before we give it out to you. Well, you'll probably see little bits at a time come out, and because we feel like, all of these things will drive you closer to that final goal. Yes, sir. So the question is around SRM and VDR snapshots. So I think if this is right, what I remember was around just the snapshot hierarchy of a VM. So there's a future feature coming out with SRM called host-based replication. And host-based replication will not replicate the snapshot tree from the source VM. So that's what it is. So VDR snapshots are temporary. So by definition, when we're done with a backup, we delete the snapshot from the tree, so you won't see it. What's left behind is an image of the backup inside the dedupe store, which is the destination disk. Good question. So anyway, so as I said, we're going to deliver this and really try to drive this over the next couple of releases and work with our ecosystem partners to go get this. But the idea then is that for the backup software vendors to make this transparent to them. For example, for offload, they should just be making a snapshot call. It's not a special snapshot call to storage XYZ, because if you have to do that, you'll never see value. So we need to make it so that this layer of extraction that says, look, all these things here that you provide, it's a snapshot. That's all the vendor needs to call. So that's what we're really trying to strive for. And you'll see significant improvements here when we stitch this together. All right, storage efficiency. Storage efficiency really comes down to having more data with less space. So compression, I'm going to pick out compression because I think everybody understands compression, right? So that's there. We're gonna do more work relative to compression. VDR today actually does compression on its dedupe store, but we're gonna look at other ways to do this. One of the things that one of the knocks against compression is the amount of cycles required for you to compress and uncompress, right? You've probably seen it. You get a zip file, and for you to go see it, you're going to have to, use it. You're going to have to uncompress it, right? And you wait for that progress bar to go from left to right. There's a lot of technologies out there that allows you to pretty much do this in real time. Algorithm improvements, obviously hardware assist, that we can actually see that you can actually compress data, even for primary storage, and be able to deliver a lot of value here. So stay tuned on that front. So compression is there. But where I think VMware is going to make a lot of difference is around link clones, right? We have that for virtual for VMware View. Probably a lot of you use that today. You can sort of see that around making use of that going forward. There's still a big gap relative to restoring link clones, so I think that's something we want to address very shortly here for folks that are running View. Actually, I want to see a show of hands. Those with View deployments. Now or in the next 12 months? Okay, all right. So we want to make sure that we don't disenfranchise folks that have desktops, right? It's a big initiative for VMware. Of all this, though, dedupe is sort of where we think, boy, that's key. We got to make that happen. So that's why we invested in dedupe for data recovery. It's important. It's a small dedupe. But there's a lot of benefits there, and we think that we can scale that up in software very, very well. However, just like with snapshots, we think that hardware will play a big role going forward because one, you guys are probably investing in these dedicated dedupe devices, and second, they've got a lot of horsepower that you really can't, when you have a general purpose CPU, it's really hard to match that. So we really do see that you need to offload when possible. But still, again, make it transparent to you, right? All you care about is like, look, I'm still doing my backups the same way I've done it. I get the benefits for the snapshot offload. I'm still writing to the destination that I had before. I get an extra kick if it happens to be infrastructure that's more suited for that for dedupe. So again, a lot of value there. So now I'm going to shift gears and talk about the cloud. And I know this is going to be a journey that all of us are going to take. I spent time with customers over the show, and I asked about the cloud. And I think there's a lot of desire to use the cloud inside the data center, right? Service for your internal customers, get along deployment times down, make it really super simple, kind of that Facebook model, if you will, of IT. But when you start talking about the hybrid cloud, i.e., reaching out outside the walls of the data center, people get a little skittish, right? Hey, there's security issues, compliance issues, a variety of other things, right? So I don't expect this to happen for everyone, but to ignore it also is not the right thing, because there's a lot of benefits to using the cloud. There's a fundamental building block in order for you to make that happen. And again, if you see, there's the common theme here is around this layer of abstraction, right? So the cloud, if you look at infrastructure as a service, which is either storage as a service or compute as a service, in order for you to go use that, generally today you're a programmer, right? There's a set of APIs that all these vendors provide you, and you can program. They're fairly high level. Most of them are REST APIs. And you can get to use them very quickly. So if you want to go create a VM and start doing stuff out in the cloud, it's very simple. If you're a vSphere users and you've got VMs running and you want to reach out to them, that's a new vocabulary that you have to go learn. And that's what we're trying to avoid, because we know that's going to be a blocker. Cloud storage gateways is one way for us to remove that. So the whole idea around cloud storage gateways is this appliance. It could be either a software appliance, which we love, or a hardware appliance, which we accept are going to be out there, and it does three things. It shows that cloud infrastructure as a well-known storage interface. So for you as an internal cloud user looking out to the hybrid cloud, it looks like iSCSI, Fibre Channel, NFS, CIFS, things that you're used to. You know exactly how to manage that. So that's one thing. The other thing that it does is it allows you to connect to multiple different infrastructure providers. So if you don't feel like you're going to have to double down with name that infrastructure vendor, you can choose whatever it is based on that. And the nice thing is this will work across our entire storage stack, right? So you can use it for backup. You can also use it for anything else. I'm showing this mainly for backup because, at least for me, I think, and I've talked to a lot of customers here, people are really looking to reduce costs on backup. Right, I'm going to use VDR as an example. When I went out there, when we were planning the product, we thought, well, most people are going to use virtual disk as a target for their backups. The number of people using old, repurposed, physical Windows servers as their destination is mind-boggling. A lot of people do that, and when I asked them, it's like, why are you using this? Why are you using really low-end hardware, like effectively decommissioned hardware for your backups? It's like, and the answer back is like, well, it's the cheapest stuff we've got, right? So I think for this, think along the same way. It's like, look, you're going to get cents per month per gig for storage in the cloud, right? And it's just, and the security pieces around it are just going to get better over time. So you shouldn't ignore that. But these cloud storage gateways, they're really three big things that they provide. One is they take the blob storage, the stuff you see out in the cloud, and they present it as well-known storage interfaces. So if you use iSCSI today, you've got your iSCSI adapter configured in ESX. Guess what? Point that to the IQN number for the IQN label for that, and then boom, you've got access to any one of those cloud providers. The second thing it does, as I said, it'll allow you to integrate with multiple different storage providers. So if you decide tomorrow, hey, you know what, I don't like vendor 1 because they raised the prices, or I like vendor 2 because they've got this new feature over here, most likely you'll be able to just do it immediately, right? No need to wait. And it makes it easier for folks like VMware to go embrace a wider variety of clouds, both ones that we want to innovate with vCloud and ones that are out there because they were first to market. The third thing is, and this mileage varies depending on the vendor, is going to be around storage acceleration. So when you're going over the WAN, right, you'd like to be as efficient as possible. You want to be able to store as much data out in the cloud and not use up as much bandwidth, because bandwidth costs money. And with backup, there's probably going to be a lot of commonalities, right? And so these devices generally are smart enough to know that and to only send stuff that needs to be sent over the wire. So you see a lot here. I don't know if there's any vendors in this space in the show floor today, but if you were to just Google up Cloud Storage Gateway, I'm sure you get a lot of hits. But something that we're going to keep track of. Yes, sir, back there. The question is, what's the time frame for this? Are you asking VMware what's the time frame for this? So. I think this is one of those things where I think we're keeping a close eye on. It's a very innovative ecosystem at this point, but it is one of these things where I think we need to see it develop first. Obviously, it needs to be both. One, you got to see an emergence of really sustainable vendors providing infrastructure as a service, right? Because you guys are not going to send it to a vendor that you don't know. And then second, we need to sort of play it out, right? Because this could end up being a WAN device. It could end up being a standalone device. It could be part of the storage stack. So I think right now there's really TBD, right? Whether it's going to be a VMware technology or whether it's something that we leverage with the ecosystem. But again, I think for you, it's something you want to start thinking about relative to enabling use of the cloud. You're going to need something like this. Otherwise it gets hard. Really does get hard for you to leverage the cloud. I saw another hand back there. No? All right. But this is the first part of the journey, right? Hey, it's cool for you to be able to write to this big disk in the cloud. You know what? Mosey does that today for $5 a month. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is the next part of the journey, right? So you can write back up to the cloud. Yeah, big deal. What's really key is restore to the cloud. Right? This is infrastructure as a service, both compute and storage. So most of the guys that you see on the previous slide, they have both. They have compute clouds and they have storage clouds. And if you're a virtual machine, guess what? As long as you got that same vSphere layer underneath you, you can run that virtual machine anywhere you want. So the compute cloud, the restore to the compute cloud really is the same as restore on-premise. It's just that you restore to this bubble called a VDC, right? Internally, we've had different code names for this. We call this poor man's DR. We've called it restore to the cloud. Call it whatever you want. But it's a choice for a customer to, on demand, decide whether they want to restore to the cloud. And you can do it. You really can do this, right? And so we want to enable that. And again, we want to enable that so that it is easy for you to go do it, right? If we tell you, look, you got to put the APIs together, it's not going to happen. So we think Redwood, the vCloud Director, is going to be a key part of this equation. So obviously the service providers that are running that compute cloud need to be running Redwood, and obviously they're running vSphere and they've got both a storage and compute cloud. But this definitely is something that we want to enable and make sure that it's available to you, right? So. How this plays out, right? And I think there was a comment around SRM today. So SRM is our site recovery manager. It's our DR product where you can DR generally from a private cloud. We are thinking about how that plays in the hybrid cloud model. Where we see this playing is like, look, there's customers that may not have a large number of workloads, may not need to have synchronous replication. Or actually may want to use both. May want to use tier 1 apps using SRM and may use tier 3 apps using this as their escape valve. So we see this playing out in very different ways. But again, this is a very easy diagram to draw on PowerPoint, but very hard to pull off in the real world because it requires a lot of components to be there. So with that, I sort of want to close out. I think for us, for me, it's a really exciting time in data protection. Backup. Everybody says, is there anything new in backup? There is. There's a bunch of things that are new in backup. For you as customers and partners, obviously, stay tuned to us here. What we try to do is to try to keep it delivered via ecosystem or deliver it inside the vSphere product, and really try to abstract a lot of the technology from you, right, so that you get the benefits without having to understand sort of the inner workings of the product. Anyway, thanks again for being here. It's almost 10 o'clock, so if you want to check into Steve Jobs' keynote, it's going to start in about 10 minutes. Those of you who have time, you can come by, hang out here. I'll answer questions, or you can come see me at noon, Moscone West, second floor. All right, thanks a lot.